Hey there, welcome to my presentation on the educational value of the game Portal from 2007 and how it relates to the rhetoric of progress as defined by Brian Sutton Smith in his book The Ambiguity of Play from 1997. In The Ambiguity of Play, this rhetoric is defined as the advocacy of the notion that animals and children, but not adults, adapt and develop through their play. Sutton Smith draws his conclusion from both animal and children's play, but for this presentation we'll be looking at a game with a target audience of a bit of a more advanced age as well as human nature. Sutton Smith points to the lack of evidence to back up the adaptive nature of play in animals, and while he also warns about drawing comparisons from animals to humans, looking up more recent studies is an excellent opportunity to dive into this analysis. The book was published over 20 years ago after all. A study on comb-footed spiders in 2011 found that the males who playmated before reaching maturity had a higher chance of surviving the real mating process later in life. Now this shows that adaptation and evolution could have worked in tandem. More playful spiders survived the mating process and lived to mate again, and if this trait is indeed hereditary, new generations of playful spiders sprung forth, and it was only their adaptation to the nature of female spiders that their survival chances were heightened. This study should also be eyed with caution since the author has been accused of manipulating data in 2012, but this particular paper has not been retracted, so I'm going to submit it into evidence. Another study from 2011 focused on analyzing play behavior in chimpanzees, humans' closest living relative, showed that solitary playing peaked in infancy, while social forms of play remained steady in quantity over the entire lifespan. This very much falls in line with Sutton Smith's own research on play, in that play that leads to social progression can be very well felt in adult animals. Let's look into skill training through play and how it relates to the video game. Portal is a puzzle-solving game in which players must navigate through obstacle courses via placing portals. What starts off as a simple "what goes into orange comes out in blue" will in later levels turn into applying a set of physical rules to set choreographies. This progression is showcased in the graph provided here. How much percentage of the puzzle solving in each level are new concepts and how many are flexible applications of the already learned material. A steady up and down of learning and applying. Now, how well this knowledge can be applied to real-world problem solving might be questionable, so we will keep this section to the game world. Of course, this in no way devalues the game itself. Sutton Smith at one point even asks how many of us go to the theater or the cinema or watch cartoons primarily to gain information about useful real-life skills. But whether we want to or not, something is learned, and this study up and down actually falls in line with adult learning models. Video games are a visual medium, and players get to experience new concepts via the level design as well as some monologues by the game's primary antagonist. They then get to reflect on them by seeing how they work out in the level, conceptualize them by trying themselves out, and then they can take the taught learning material and apply it in the further progression. Obviously, learning how to place portals is not going to be of much use to the average Joe, but is there really no future benefit in it? I will go into that more in a bit. In the game itself, the biggest payoff in the end, the biggest future benefit is being fully equipped to master the final boss fight and therefore also master the game. It is not just the boss fight themselves that players have to master, it is also the lead up to this, because while the majority of the game takes place in testing chambers, the final result of it is, in a way, the appliance of the learned material from the testing chambers in a action-packed escape act. Now let's take a gander on how the game would apply itself as play fighting. So what Sutton Smith often refers to as rough and tumble playing is really more of a set of bright red flashes on the screen and some high-pitched turret squealing within the game. Stressful for sure, but not scar-inducing. The game doesn't have permadeath, and despite what the Big Brother Bud GLaDOS might occasionally be alluding to, is actually keen on equipping the player to master their levels rather than fail them. Game design, after all, should create challenges, not frustration. Like animal species you could fight without injuring benefited from it on a survival note, just like that, players experiencing less frustration had a higher chance of actually finishing the game and coming back to buy a new one. Of course, how much help it is for players to figure out their place in a social hierarchy based on having defeated GLaDOS is a mystery. But there is another opponent to square up against. Although it might not be Portal 2 co-op's mode primary function, the game does certainly have a knack of pinning this opposite team against each other. In this multiplayer mode, besides the usual puzzle solving and reaction abilities, players' teamwork and social ability is now tested through some monologues from GLaDOS that are very clearly designed not to foster harmony, constantly remarking who is doing a better job, and even reacting very strongly towards player versus player behavior, like for example, doing a certain action that leads to the other player character's death, actually falls in line with play fighting. There is a perceived hierarchy created by the game which serves the purpose to test the bonds. Then again, it is this very play fighting that actually hinders progress in the game. Sutton Smith remarks on the lack of evidence that support that people playing together stay together. And while there is obviously no data on how many friendships were destroyed or strengthened through the Portal co-op mod, the only way to beat the game is through good communication, patience, teamworking, and learning together how the levels work and figuring them out. And now comes the time when we finally get back to the future benefits gained from playing. It is in flexibility of the acquired skill both in Sutton Smith analysis of animal play and the real-world application of having played Portal where the usefulness of play really comes to fruition. P.K. Smith notes in his 1982 paper Does Play Matter? Functional and Evolutionary Aspects of Animal and Human Play, that play was selected to develop complex, social, and generalized cognitive abilities. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no raw data on how Portal has influenced social abilities, but cognitive, on the other hand, have very well benefited from playing Portal. In 2015, a study titled The Power of Play, The Effects of Portal 2 and Lumosity on Cognitive and Non-Cognitive Skill tested problem-solving, spatial, and persistent skill on participants both for Portal and Lumosity, which is a gamified learning platform. And while a significant influx in capabilities in these matters could be observed in Portal players, the same could not be said about participants who had been engaged in Lumosity for 8 hours. Sutton Smith notes that both on animal and the human level, the play phenomenon is for the greater part banal and repetitive, and so is playing Portal. While the game might have been designed with physics in mind, if the average player would be asked to postulate about mathematical functions for momentum and velocity, having finished the game would make one none the wiser. They can certainly be used to assist real learning processes of physics, as shown by programs like Teach with Portal and Steam for Schools that offered the puzzle-making part of the game for educational purposes for free. The game itself is not educational. The increase of spatial awareness, problem-solving, and persistence, however, that is gained as a byproduct, might very well come in handy. Finally, Sutton Smith finds that a purpose of play in animals might be the state of positive emotions that stem from it. A hamster running around in a wheel for adrenaline, as well as players' determination to get through the testing chambers to achieve mastery, might have some similarities. The hamster probably knows it has no goal. And most players have certainly figured out by now that the cake is a lie, but this does not devalue the laughter they got from GLaDOS' quirky insults, or the feelings of accomplishment after walking out of a more difficult level without looking at a walkthrough, or the feeling of being united with a companion cube. This is it from me, and thank you so much for everyone's attention.